So I made a video about the noise that my ice maker makes in this Frigidaire side-by-side refrigerator. There's a picture of the front of it. There is a picture of the model number information. You can stop the video there, pause it, and read that if you like. Now, going into the freezer, what I located, let me pull the ice holder out, the bin, set that aside. I took the front cover off the ice maker, and sure as I was thinking what it was were these two gears clicking. I knew it sounded like two gears clicking. The larger gear is connected to a cam, and that cam is also connected to the white shaft that runs back here, which is connected to the paddles, which actually harvest the ice once it's ready. And there is a heating element. I located a heating element on the bottom of this thing. I don't know if you can see it there. It runs, it's that silver device underneath that white wire that loops around and comes back. It's just a resistance coil. So I checked that to make sure that that was actually operating, and I got 2.7 ohms through it, so it was definitely working. It wasn't burnt open or anything. But this large dowel would sit there. The small dowel, the small gear, is actually the drive gear. It's the one that's connected to a motor, and it spins the larger one around. Then right behind this silver plate right here, there are several micro switches, and each micro switch is adjacent to a cam right behind the large gear, and each one of those micro switches has a function. One is to turn the motor on for a harvest. One is to turn the valve on to fill the ice maker tray with water. Another one is to bring the heating element on prior to a harvest, so on and so forth. And it takes several minutes for that to turn completely around in a harvest. And what I noticed was it just kept sitting there clicking, and the gear would snap past the large gear. The small gear would snap past the large gear. The large gear was connected to the harvest paddles, and they had reached the ice and would not spin any longer. And this is a fairly common problem in Frigidaire, Electrolux made refrigerator freezers, the clicking noise. And there are quite a few that do this. The flaw is twofold. The tray that holds the ice, that holds the water that freezes and turns to ice, is actually nickel. It's a nickel metal molded shaped thing that forms the ice cubes. And apparently it has some sort of an anti-slip material sprayed into it when it's new. And I'll show you a picture of what I located in my workshop, believe it or not, that is used just for this purpose. But in any event, after a period of time, that silicone wears out, which helps the harvest. Even with the heater by itself, the ice has too many surfaces that sticks to the tray and will not allow that large wheel to continue turning. And it sits there and it clicks over and over and over again, and you get no ice out of it. It just won't move. And by the time it finally does get through and turns the ice over, finally, if it ever does, in my case it actually shut the whole thing off. I don't know what happened internally, but the whole motor and everything just stopped. Apparently there's some kind of a safety timer built into it to where it shuts itself off after it sits there and tries to click for a while. But this doohickey right here this thing with the screw, and it's a Phillips head screw, and there's a spring in there that actually moves a plate, which a micro switch is connected to down in here, that actually controls the water valve. And when the large wheel spins around, and there's a notch built into it, and it gets to a certain place, that micro switch is released long enough for the water to come in that chute back there in the very back and fill the trays up. And by moving this screw, you're actually moving the micro switch closer or further away from the cam behind this large gear, and that allows the water valve to stay on longer or shorter. And in my case, it was wide open. It was moved all the way back to make the largest cubes possible. And what I discovered was, by moving it closer, by taking a Phillips screwdriver and actually turning it closer, making the gap here closer, it actually shortens the cycle. It fills with less water, so there's less water frozen in the tray, less surface of actual ice in that nickel tray, and that helps in harvesting the smaller cube size. So it's a combination of heating element and the proper cube size, and the anti-stick material, the food grade silicone, which apparently wears out depending on your water source, what's in it. I assume it just goes away after a while, or coats the nickel with some sort of solids from the water. And I'm using reverse osmosis water here to try to remove everything to begin with, but apparently that wasn't 100% foolproof. Let me get the can of spray and I'll show you what that looks like. And here is the can of material I used, and you can see that it is a food grade silicone mold release, which I use also on a food slicer that I have to lubricate the arm that moves the product across the blade. Let me show you that. Right here is the slicer, and in order to lubricate that periodically, I spray that. In any event, I had that on hand, but it's also it's specifically actually designed for mold release, as you can see on the label. And so I was able to remove 2 screws, pull the ice maker out of the freezer, put it on the table, and that's how I tested everything and found out how it worked. I took it all apart. Usually the way to find out how something works is to take it all apart, try to remember where everything went, look at every possible avenue of problem, and then try to fix it. In this case, all I could find was an ice cube tray full of ice that would not harvest, and a gear that would not turn. And the only thing I could figure was there was either too much ice, in other words too large of an ice cube, or the silicone had worn off, or both. I tested the heating element. I was able to check that circuit, and I was able to locate the leads that come out of it, put those on a meter, and it showed 2.7 ohms across the heating element, which means it's good. So when it gets to the position where the micro switch behind that silver plate in there comes on and brings continuity, I'll show you again, brings continuity to the circuit, at that point it brings that heater on underneath and heats that nickel ice cube holder tray, whatever you want to call it. It heats that up, and then the arms continue, the paddles continue to pick the ice up and throw it into the bin. In my case, that had stopped. It was not moving past the place where the paddles came in contact with the ice. It would just sit there and click over and over and over again. It would snap past that gear. It just, the motor, the smaller gear, could not turn the larger one. And I've basically gone ahead, sprayed it up, adjusted the amount of water going in to a lesser amount, and I'm going to have to play with that until I get to a place where it'll harvest normally all the time. And I will update this video as I get more information, but right now I think I have it repaired.